Today we are interviewing local author Dustin Renwick. Thank you so much for being here today in this odd format. We really appreciate you coming to talk with us.
Absolutely. Excited to do it.
So I'm just going to ask you a couple questions. First off, can you tell me a little bit about yourself and your book?
Yeah, so I actually grew up in Monmouth, Illinois, so just across the river over in Western Illinois, and my grandparents are from Biggsville, so uh, pretty familiar with Burlington and just sort of the Western Illinois area. And I was visiting them and happened to find this book, old book, antique book, and it had some newspaper clippings in it, and it talked about this poet from Kirkwood, Illinois. And I had never heard of him. Nobody, I asked other people around, no one had heard of him. So I started trying to dig in and see what was out there, and there was really not a whole lot. But I started sort of pulling on those threads, and several months later, ended up pretty deep in research, and the product of that was this book. So the book is actually a biography of this poet named J.P. Irvine, who grew up in Kirkwood. His family was one of the first settlers, sort of the pioneer families in Western Illinois. And he went on to become a poet of some renown, lived out here in DC, where I'm based now, and then went back to Western Illinois later in his life and is buried down in Kirkwood. So the book is a biography of him that sort of weaves in the history of Western Illinois and the Midwest, and then looks at sort of where he fits in that narrative, and then examines kind of his time out here in DC as well. One of the things I was trying to do, and there's no direct evidence, but one of the things I was trying to do is really see, was there any connection between him and some of the more notable writers out here? He was a government clerk here in DC when he lived here for several years. And Walt Whitman and John Burroughs and some of these other larger names that we know now, they were government clerks too. This was kind of a pattern. So I was never able to find any direct correspondence. But DC was a much smaller city. It's a small city now, but it's a much smaller city in the 1870s when Irvine was here. And so I kind of lay out the case of like, there's a good possibility that they crossed paths. But I was never able to find any letters or anything like that that confirmed it. But that's sort of the gist of the book.
Wonderful. Did you use your library in any process of writing your book?
So much, so much. I have the back of the book has several acknowledgement thank yous to librarians who were so crucial. I'm a journalist by training, so I'm sort of used to doing some archival research, but this was even another step beyond what I normally go through for a story. Was really working with several excellent librarians, both in Western Illinois and then out here in DC, the Library of Congress, helping me to understand some of their archival materials, helping me to get access to a lot of the microfilm. A lot of poetry in that day was published in newspapers, and a lot of those newspapers we don't have physical copies of, but we do have the microfilm for. So there was a lot of scrolling through microfilm to try and find these poems that were effectively, I don't want to say that they were lost, but they've certainly been buried. So trying to pull those out of the archives. And so yeah, I worked directly with librarians at the Monmouth College Library over in Monmouth, the library down at Western Illinois University, because they have some of the microfilm from Western Illinois. I came over to Burlington, but he didn't quite get there. There's a couple of records of him and his family visiting Burlington, but there's nothing in the newspapers there. And then again, like I said, out here at the Library of Congress, absolutely essential to getting some of the DC newspapers historically that were published there, as well as the DC Public Library. They actually had some hard copies, so I was actually able to see some of the broadsheets from the 1870s, which is pretty cool to sort of have those in person and think, this is a newspaper from 1872 that I'm now touching in, what was then 2015, 2016. So
It's amazing the treasures you can find in a library.
Yes.
You wouldn't expect to find them.
Yes, no, libraries are such great resources. I try and tell everybody, go talk to your librarians. They're excellent. Even if they can't help you, they probably know someone who can, and just absolutely invaluable for this book. Yeah.
We love to hear that. Where can our patrons get your book?
Well, I looked. I don't think there's a copy at Burlington Library, but I know that there is a copy over at the Monmouth Library, and I think also maybe one at Western. So there's a few libraries around there, and if people don't know about interlibrary loan, they should definitely talk about that too. But if they want to buy it, it's available online as well. Amazon and bookshop.org is a really great one too. And I'm actually right now working on what will be kind of the second edition, because I've been doing some research in the last 5 years since that book, originally was published. As things get digitized, more information is out there in places that I might not have been able to visit in person, so I can now access them digitally. So there's actually been a fair bit of interesting material that's come up since I published it. So I'm sort of working on the second edition that's going to, I think, strengthen some of those ties and actually show some more connections. One of the things I'm really excited about is I'm intuiting, at least from the material I've found, that he might have had some direct contact with Sarah Piatt, who's looked at as one of the basically the most renowned woman poet behind Emily Dickinson of that era. So hopefully getting to explore some more of Sarah Piatt's work and maybe her connection to Irvine too. So.
Do you have an idea when that one will be out so we can watch for it?
I would love to. It was supposed to be done this year. The hard thing with the pandemic is that a lot of archives are closed. So the librarians who might have been helping me, they aren't actually able to access the in-person physical archives. So I'm sort of waiting for things to open up again. But hopefully, if not this year, then early to mid next year. So.
Wonderful. We wish you luck on that, and
Thank
hopefully
you.
Pandemic ends soon so things can open up.
That's right. And worst case scenario is next year's Sterling Lord event, it'll be out in time for that. So
we look forward to it. Thank you for taking time to join us today and share your work.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for the opportunity.